the action sequences, it's pretty clear because it's very like, first beginning, middle, end. It tells you what they are. For other stuff, it's based on the skill that you're using. And I don't have it all lined up right now, but most of it is going to be pain. Pain is kind of the lingua franca. It's not always physical pain. It can also be emotional pain. It's just it's weight. It really should be called weight.
Yeah, I'm liking that because that's precisely the narrative feature that I'm interested in. There indeed could be certain sorts of ways to play your character whereby you end up accepting that a lot.
Yeah.
Where there are other ways to play your character where that's kind of your priority to keep that from happening.
Yeah, it's Constantine versus another superhero.
Right.
Constantine was like, I'm going to make sure this stuff happens to other people. Right. Fuck me, fuck that. I don't want any.
Right.
Whereas like, Superman is all about bring it on. Right. I'll take it. Nobody else does.
So in the case of, I already talked about incomplete information. I guess I was thinking incomplete information is a little different from deception because although deception can result in it, I was talking more about a situation not where somebody's actively trying to deceive you, but where you just aren't picking up enough. But you know what? Your mechanic is the same. One just happens to be asking a very deceptive person. So your role is hampered by their abilities, and others is just, your ordinary information seeking methods.
Yeah.
And they happen not to have come up optimally. So you end up with incomplete information. Go ahead.
The one thing about this table is, and this might not be a problem, is I'm always shaky on the player knows they rolled a 1. So they know they're wrong. Like I say, here's what's going on. She loves her daughter. You can tell. And then he's like, well, I rolled a 1.
Right. You see, this is this is the interesting point. There are, as I see it, is that there are games in which knowledge of your character's ignorance or mistaken impression is a huge benefit. And then there are games when exactly the opposite is true. And it's not based on principle. When people tell you, well, you should never have out of player knowledge. It's not that. I'm talking about how it relates to the rest of the pieces of the game. In this game, does having that knowledge make the game less fun, make it harder for me to play my character, or does it make it more fun, make it easier for me to play my character?
Well, that's the thing. For a player who's going to get it, who's invested in the kind of the actor kind of thing, where they're like, okay, now I know my motivation. Right. I totally believe her. But as a player, I know she's full of shit. So how can I use it?
Right, but the point is, you can that at least in some ways to play. And again, I don't know which it is for this game, but in some ways to play, you make the best mistakes.
Right.
Because you, the player, know how wrong your character is.
Right.
And so you say, well, then I'm going to do this. You say, I'm going to do this, and everybody at the table clutches their head in horror because they know that makes perfectly good sense, knowing what you do.
I had so
that can be a lot of fun.
A little anecdote, a brief anecdote. A long time ago, I played in a werewolf LARP. And at the end of the game, we did our kind of go to Denny's and talk about the game. And one guy's like, I can't believe you didn't realize I was in league with the bad guys. And I'm like, oh my God, my second in command was a total traitor. I didn't even know. Hilarious. Wow, that was great. You totally fooled me, blah, 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 blah. A year later, the guy decides to run a sequel. This guy is still my second in command. At one point in the game, we have the MacGuffin, and I'm like, my second in command, I trust you above all else.
Of course, here go. Right.
And he's just like, I can't believe you did that because you knew. And I'm like, yeah, but
my guy didn't, and this is what we liked.
Didn't.
Right.
And
exactly.
This is
and you might
so.
And so that can be amazing, and I've seen it way too many times to write it off as, well, only good players do that, Bullshit.
Right.
It is
Right.
actually anyone who's invested.
Right. The trick is to get them invested into making the mistake.
Well, I'm not even sure it's a trick, but the thing that I'm saying though is that there are games. I mean, I might even have said, okay, well that's just better then. But there are games in which that lack of knowledge is actually a good thing.
Yeah.
There's in the game that we're about to start playing. We've prepped for it, and I'll be playing in just a couple of days. For specific skills, it's mandated that the game master rolls and doesn't reveal the result, and that by doing that skill, by definition, your character is presented with evidence of success.
Right.
For an easy example, crafting is an excellent example. This game has like 80 skills for crafting different things, no lie. But in this case, let's say you're doing leather laces, on something, and it's important that these leather laces are well made and well tied. So the game master rolls the skill, tells you no problem, it's socked up tight. And that's the point though. They'll tell you that no matter what, and
Right.
So it's not as though you're saying, well, you told me this, or how am I going to put it? You knew that you were going to be given the evidence of a successful roll in the fiction before you rolled.
Right.
You ironically, just don't know how well that actually was tied.
Right. And ironically, if you screwed it up, the GM would be like, basically, if you rolled well, the GM would probably say, well, you broke that pair of laces.
Right.
So you build a stronger pair.
Well, maybe. The point is that in this particular game, it's mandated that the narration is always the same.
Right.
That you did it.
Horror games are like that.
Yeah.
Hiding I found that in horror games, if the players are rolling, it's more of a power thing. And if the GM's rolling, it's more of a fear thing.
Right. So if no matter if they say I hide, you're saying you do. Right. Click, clack, and you do. And it's not even as though you're trying to fool them, because the narration will be the same. They know it's an unknown. And and I rather like that particular mechanic too. So it's kind of up to you. It's terribly confusing to have two ways to do it as far as information is concerned, especially. Mm-hmm. If there's two ways to do it in the game, that's terribly confusing. So in many ways, I'd have to say pick your poison, right? Which one is more fun for this game?
Well, the GM never rolls, so the GM's not going to be rolling for the player at any time.
Right. Well, that's an interesting point, though. I mean, do you hand your dice to the GM for that particular purpose?
Oh.
And I mean, and maybe if it's a fairly isolated mechanic, whenever it is sort of the,
that would be the difference between
school.
The two tables, right?
Right.
Asking questions, they go to the GM. Taking action, the player does it.
Right. Something like that. So there's some interesting ideas there. Just tossing that over, right?
And that takes care of that takes care of the dramatic irony problem.
Right.
Period. It's like,
because you are going to act as if it was great. You just are, right? And so, and I agree. I mean, that again, I'm not claiming there is no optimum. There's what's ever best for that particular game.
Yeah.
Right. So go ahead.
I'm just gonna make a note about that, because that might be. I didn't even think about that. I was like pretty binary about the rolling, but I didn't even think there are two tables.
Mm-hmm.
And usually I split my tables in half, and the GM takes the bottom half, and the player takes
the inspectors. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, but this is two different tables for two different types of actions, two different roll. That's interesting, because the GM is going to know the result and is going to tell you whether if it's a good result. So why wouldn't they also tell you a bad result? Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna handle that way for now.
Yeah. So then we take a look at the another question of mine, which has to do with the character's relationship with, for lack of a better word, oh God, what does Vax call it? Does he call? He doesn't call it the straight world, does he? The real world, the normal people, the car
He calls
owners
them
and
he calls them citizens or
citizens.
civilians.
That's it. Right.
Citizens.
Right. Yeah. The
He has a bunch of
citizens.
names for them.
Right.
The
That's the one I
world.
was thinking of.
There's the prison where it's the world is
Right.
outside prison.
Right.
It's
But
not the real world.
I'm thinking of the citizens.
Yeah.
And so, how, for purposes of this game,
That's a good term, by the way, for non-combative NPC types, just citizens, people who aren't contacts or enemies or
right?
opponents.
Well, and the important thing, though, is that they are, in fact, an important presence because you don't get to be one.
Right.
And if I'm reading if I'm assessing the situation correctly, I don't think you can make up a citizen character, a player character. Right.
The closest you can is the troubleshooter, or sorry, the underdog or the survivor. And the underdog is like basically on their way from citizenhood to something greater. And the survivor is just fucked up. They've undergone so much trauma that they're no longer part of that world.
Exactly. They're gone at that point.
They're like, I'm still a fry cook, but now I'm a fry cook who fought serial killers.
Right.
So
right. So in that case, I'm interested in, now this is going to sound weird, the citizenry as its own kind of threat.
Okay.
Because you have to kind of keep from being noticed. They have words for people like you.
Right. Well, it's like Vampire Masquerade, right?
Right. A little bit. Yeah. I mean, there's no surprise there. I mean, there is a lot of similarity. And so you can't really, none of them pass well. The only person who really passes is the prof, because he basically pretends that he has no legs and roams right. He sort of hides in plain sight, being something that they expect and have.
Well, he's somebody who people usually ignore anyway.
Right, right.
He's a homeless guy.
Exactly. I mean, his disguise is in many ways just a mobile form of camouflage. Yeah. So, on the other hand, Burke can't ever really let his he's never able to go into a social situation and have a conversation in some way that the citizen can respect or understand. Whenever he's really nose to nose with a citizen, it's usually a matter of threat, or
it's a threat or a con.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And a lot of people are like that. I mean, Flood's exactly the same way. She maybe passes a little better, but the point is that she can't live in a normal place. She has to go back to a temple. She has to go back to a dojo and live there. Yeah. She can't live.
Well, when she interacts with somebody from the real world, it's the superintendent of the building, and she ends up like,
Oh no, she basically, if the guy lives, if the citizen lives,
she puts him in the hospital.
Right.
I don't mean kick like you would mean, Mr. Burke. I mean, he'll have to go to a hospital.
Exactly. Right. So in the case of these citizens, though, they can be in their way very, very dangerous, because what can they do to you? I mean, you have to use Streetwise or something similar in order to keep I feel a looming threat of normality. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. There's this looming threat of the normal world, which has no place for you, has a name for you, would love to see you incarcerated, and wouldn't mind too badly if you were dead. And so and it's not just because of it's an identity thing. I mean, they want you gone or dead or incarcerated because you're breathing.
Right.
They don't like to look at you. And so that sense of, utter alienation is critical, for all of this, really. I mean, it's one of the reasons why, these crooked cop characters are so popular at this time. These sort of off the books cops and, maverick sorts. It's one of the reasons why they're so popular in these movies. The romantic version, kind of the Miami Vice version, is kind of silly, but the To Live and Die in L.A., God, it's hard to say. That version
Right.
is actually it's a little jarring. It's alarming.
And he's
the
awful, bad guy.
Man, I'm telling you, man, that guy's horrible.
He's the bad guy.
Seriously.
Willem Dafoe's just a criminal.
No, I know. Exactly. I mean, you understand him. He makes sense. He likes to have sex. Yeah. He likes to do drugs, and he likes to make money. I get it. But, yeah. Anyway, though. But
I also need room. I also need room for John McClane.
Right.
I also need room for that.
Well, you see, that's the thing. I mean, McClane's an interesting point because I'm not that interested in the later movies. And in the first movie, he is extraordinarily vulnerable and sympathetic.
Yeah, I'm just talking about
forgets that in the first movie. Yeah. He's actually extremely likable. Well, obnoxious, but very likable, very caring person.
Yeah.
So in the but anyway, what I'm driving at is that none of these characters, and I picked the cop one because that's kind of institutionally the closest to citizenry. But none of them are really ever going to be citizens.
Right.
Even John McClane, unless he's really on his best behavior, he's sitting at a dinner table and somebody's going to try and, it'll be like talking to Rorschach's psychiatrist. Someone's going to try and josh him about, the dangerous job or something, and he will blurt out some heinous thing which you don't say at dinner.
Right. Exactly.
Right. So,
or he'll misinterpret,
Oh yeah. He's you can't take him anywhere, basically. That's